All right, welcome back to Hand Therapy Briefs. My name is Marilla Deischer, and I'm really excited to welcome Cynthia Watkins of the Rothman Orthopaedic Institute. And Cynthia, can you tell us a little bit about your role? I know you wear a few hats at Rothman Orthopaedics, so I'll let you talk about that a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Marilla, so much for having me here today. So officially, my title at Rothman Orthopaedics is the Associate Director of Therapy Services. So whenever you get these ambiguous corporate titles, you wonder, what does that person do? So one of the things I do is I'm the director of our internal hand therapy program. So those employees are hired directly through the company, through Rothman, and I act as their director, providing them with support when they need coverage, hiring people, disciplinary action when that happens, performance reviews, all of the things that you would think of, leading a department. And then the other hat that I wear that is kind of a unique hat is that I am the liaison between Rothman and the physical therapy companies that provide our physical therapists. Those are all contracted employees. So we have different relationships with different vendors in 4 states. So that's a unique experience where I'm managing external customers rather than internal customers.
Okay, so that's where you are now.
That's what I'm doing now.
But you started out, you were a physical therapist, and then you chose this wonderful specialty of hand therapy and became a certified hand therapist.
Correct.
So kind of take us down the road from being a clinician. How did you move towards having an interest in management? And I know this is more of an administrative role, but what did that transition look like?
Yeah, so I was fortunate that I kind of started off in a little bit of a management role from the get-go. I started off in hand therapy from the get-go. I decided I wanted to do hand therapy before I even went to physical therapy school. I know that's kind of unique, but I was switching from another field and knew what I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to do hand therapy. And I was working with, so my first job in hand therapy was working with a privately owned clinic, private physician owned clinic. And he was helping his mentor, who I won't mention his name, but he's very well known in the Philadelphia hand world. And it was time for his mentor to step away from surgery. And so he was going to help him ease into retirement, and he was taking over his practice downtown. So there was a downtown office and there was a suburban office, and fresh out of the gate, they hired me to be the lead at that downtown office, which is in retrospect insane. But it was, but I learned a lot at that first job. So I started off with my foot in the door as, a lead position in a very specialized field. It's not very common. And I worked in that for probably 3.5 years. There were some different changes within that organization. And then I decided that I needed to step back from such a specialized discipline and get a little bit more experience just as a generalized physical therapist, which I hadn't really done. And so I took a sharp right turn and worked in an inner city hospital in going from a very cushy job on the main line to a very inner city hospital where, we would have people who patients would leave the hospital in their gowns and be found in the bars underneath the L drinking on a bar stool. So I'm giving you a picture here. It was an interesting place. But long story short, I worked there for a brief time doing outpatient orthopedics, and I would go up on the floors and do acute care evaluations on the floor and in ICU, the whole gamut. And I relocated. And I worked in another state in a very big private practice. This woman basically owned therapy for the whole city, like every practice. She was like the monopoly in town. And we had every discipline of PT and OT and vestibular and pediatrics and neurological, and you could be any kind of therapist you wanted. So I worked there for a bit of time, just doing generalized again. And then I got the opportunity to come back to the Philadelphia region, and I worked as a subcontractor for Rothman, but I wasn't employed by them. And it just so happened that one of the hand surgeons I had originally worked with was working there, and we connected, and I started treating his patients. So I was treating hand patients, treating generalized orthopedic outpatient. And then when my co-worker left, then I became the manager in that role.
Okay.
And then the opportunity came up to leave that and go work for Rothman independently, because they didn't have hand therapy in-house. So I came in-house in 2010,
Okay.
and I was the sole practitioner. And then we did some mergers, and then we started building and hiring. And so when I left that position, I was managing, I don't remember, 30 something clinics across the 4 states.
And
So
when did you become a CHT? So you were 2010 at Rothman, where you are now. When were
yes.
you a CHT? When did you get
Yeah,
that?
CHT was in 2005.
Okay.
2005. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
you,
so
yeah,
go ahead.
you started out in management,
Mhm.
so that's interesting. So because you're learning 2 new roles, you're still learning to
Yes,
be a therapist, and then
yes,
so that, yeah, must have been interesting.
yes.
With regards to the clinical role and then the management role, because I'm sure you're doing both, at points, when you're transitioning
Mhm.
first into these roles, what I often notice is that you're still treating and you're doing this additional, supervising and operational type tasks. So can you
Yes,
talk a little bit about that and
sure.
balancing the two, working with clinicians that are your colleagues, but then also being in a role of, operations and needing to move
Yeah.
people around potentially, or, whatever
Hmm.
you need to do?
Yes. So I will say, so when I started there in 2010, it was just myself. And then later that year, I want to say, time sneaks up on us, but I'm going to say later that year is when we acquired a couple of practices. So maybe I was managing 5 people or something.
Uh-huh.
And then the next year it grew and it grew. So when they gave me the 5 people to manage, and Mike Mueller was one of the first people in that group. And he could tell you a funny story about our first day together, and we had to call 911. So,
Oh.
which I had never had to do before. So in any case, I was given 4 hours a week, 4 hours a week to manage.
Mhm.
Right. And then it kept growing, and they would let me hire someone to help, because I was trying to like backfill part of the clinical aspect of what I had to do. But then what kept happening was, oh, we have a new office. And, with all of the process and procedure kinds of things with the insurance, it's like, well, we have this person, they're ready to go, or we can delay this by several months because of all the paperwork. And so it would be like, all right, take the person. So it kept happening. It kept happening.
Mhm.
And one of the things I would say, a lesson to learn is I kind of got punished in a way for letting that person go later, because I went to management and said, well, I've been doing this all by myself, this. And I remember distinctly the person saying, well, that's on you. Like, we gave you the help. You chose to do that. And it was
Mhm.
like, oh, well, that's a life lesson. Like,
Mhm.
you're not going to, just because you keep taking it on is
Right,
not going to reward you in that corporate world.
right.
So I had to learn, like, oh, okay, you've got to take care of yourself. You
Mhm.
can't just keep taking it on and thinking that you're going to get promoted and raises and all of the things for um, trying to do it all yourself. Like, so
So
delegating.
how did you end up balancing that out after that realization?
Yeah. So it would be, okay, have a new office. We need this. Well, I'm not going to let go of my person. We have to outsource. We have to wait. It's like, there may be a time gap
Right,
because I didn't have the information in time. And so
right.
now you're going to have to wait, but I'm not giving up my person. But so that's a little list. Go ahead, Morella, if you had
Well, I
something.
was just like, were you becoming aware of maybe skills that you didn't have in the manager role that you had to
Mhm.
develop? And
Absolutely.
uh, because I've been there, and so I definitely, lacked skills in how to develop them. So can
Yes.
you talk about the skills you were becoming aware that, you would need
Mhm.
to learn in order to, be effective as a manager, but also still as a clinician?
Sure. So I would say a lot of it in those early days, there was a lot of work that I did on the weekends, like discussing, what was going on at work and taking long car rides, thinking about this and that, and all of these different things. Because it's a very, very different role, like the management role and the clinical role. The clinical role, the patient comes in, you see the patient, you set your goals, it has an end point. They're going to
Mhm.
get better and they're going to get discharged. They're going to plateau and they're going to get discharged, or they're going to get worse and you're going to divert them to the services they need. Business is not like that at all. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges I have, because I went into orthopedics because I like black and white. It's like, it's broken, we fix it.
Right.
And managing people is,
Mhm.
and management itself is relationships all day long and nebulousness. So it is a lot of, having to interact with, like you said, your peers, your team, and you're having to disseminate changes to them that they may or may not like,
Right.
but you're having to project it like this is what's best for the group,
Mhm.
i.e. the company that you work for
Right.
in a lot of cases.
Right.
And it may not be the best thing for you as an individual, but that's my new role, is I have to, we have to do what the company is asking us to do. But then another challenge is you're having to manage up the chain. So, a conversation with a therapist is very different than a conversation with upper management. Like, I although as a therapist, I think some of the skills you were asking about, how your hand therapy skills apply,
Mhm.
like from the beginning, I've always, when I have a problem case and I need to talk to the surgeon, I would have the patient's name, when they had the injury, when they had the surgery, how many weeks post-op we are. These are the things that are going well. These are the things that I have questions about, with a proposed answer to the question, what do you think? Because you're going to approach them in the beginning of their day, get in fast, get it dealt with, and get out. Like, you're not wasting your time or their time.
Mhm.
So conversations with management are very much the same way. Like, you're not talking about how Susie feels or what you think or imagine. It's more, I try to go in with succinct data and then also have a plan in mind and give them options. So you're not just taking it in and saying, how do you feel about this? It's like, try to take the emotional component out and
Right.
deal with the facts, and use as few words as possible. There are people that you talk to that's like, if you could talk in bullet points, they would love that. So
Yes.
it took a while in the beginning. I would try to I had to report to, it was a smaller company at that point, and I had to report directly to the COO, and trying to explain that, therapist A has got 2 kids and she works Tuesday from 10 to 2 and Friday from 1. And he's like, wait. Like, I don't want to know the names. I don't want to know all that. Just boil it down for me. Like,
Mhm.
less is more when talking to management,
Mhm.
and talking to therapists. More is always more with talking to
Right.
therapists, because you deal with the patient, so you're used to really getting in. What are your ADLs? What are you having difficulties with? How many grandkids you have? How much does your dog weigh? It's like it gets way, way, way in the details. And the management part is like only what I need to know because I've got a lot of other decisions to make. So, yeah.
So people are reporting to you and you're reporting to people.
Yes.
And so it's that, you know, like you said, kind of leading up and down the chain, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What parts of management then appealed to you, you know, to kind of go down that road? What kind of
Well, I will say when I took the position at Rothman, you know, living in Philadelphia, you always have another organization that was set as the standard. And we all know what that is. But it was always a thing of like, you know, they're not, this gave me the opportunity, like they're not the only horse in town, game in town, and starting from scratch. So I was really loved that part of it. And other than the mergers, I got to hire my own team. I got to pick everyone, you know. We can talk about the difference between hiring your team and acquiring your team and the challenges of that. We can come back to that. But we got to pick my own team, decide the structure of the department because they really knew nothing about hand therapy. So it was really, really fun, you know, to start it from, it was like making my own company. It was like making my own company from scratch with a company within a company. I used to have a boss who would talk about like the size of your company in relative terms to the company. And it was like, if it was Europe, you know, how big your country would be. And I was like, we're just Luxembourg, but we have a big impact. So I really love that part. And then and setting it up, you know, how we were going to train people and how we were going to, you know, have student fellowships and all of that, you know, from the very beginning.
Yeah. I mean, that appeals to me, you know, in terms of, because really you're still a clinician and you're building a hand therapy team, you know, that's really the focus. It really is therapy.
Yeah.
Was there any point in like where you're moving away from that and now like reporting maybe at a higher level, maybe it's more administrative and less management, where now it's really about metrics? And the focus is on productivity, and now you're needing to be able to track those metrics and report on those metrics. Like, how did you get there? Because that's a big jump for someone that's a clinician.
Yes. So I would say we were always doing that from the beginning, but with it's become in the recent years more and more scrutinized, I would say, and much more taken into account. It's like because we work for the company I work for is a surgical practice, on the grand scheme of things, our money is still way down here compared to the revenue that's brought in. But yeah, so the role I'm in now, so the role when I started was very much really just about building the practice. There really wasn't much, the numbers were there, but there wasn't much scrutiny because we were growing so fast that the money was just following. We weren't having to worry about that. But as we've grown and with the expansion and such, I went from the 4 hours to then they gave me 2 days a week to do all of this, plus treat all my patients. And then right before I got switched out of that department, I was doing 3 days a week. So I managed to get it up to 3 days a week of management and 2 days of patient care. And I always try to balance it with our clinicians. Like, these are the expectations, you know, set forth by management. We have to meet them. But if we can come together as a team, I've always been an advocate for realistic expectations. So we are still, I have to say, as far as in the arena of therapy, I think that they're very realistic expectations. I don't feel that we're at a place where, you know, we're subbing out duties to an unauthorized individual or student or any of those things. We're all still personally seeing our patients,
Uh-huh.
and it's realistic. So there's a part of it where I don't think I could manage if I felt like I was putting these expectations on people for unrealistic metrics. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
so number one, I feel because I was involved from the beginning, I was able to help set the metrics.
Right.
So I'm personally involved. So I know
Right.
that these are realistic, and I've lived them myself for,
Right.
over 10 years. I'm like, if I had to come into the clinic and do this, it's doable,
Right.
So, so there's that part of it. So I don't feel that I am asking someone to do something that I personally wouldn't want to do or be able to do.
Mhm.
And then the metrics themselves. So now I'm in a role. 2 years ago, they took me out. They decided, let's restructure how we organize this and how we're going to have department heads and such. And so
Mhm.
they eliminated department heads. So I was in this temporary role for 2 years where I was purely operations, nothing, no treating, and I
Mhm.
was over a region for a bunch of different departments. So it was things I knew and things I really didn't know. So, and
Yeah.
things I kind of knew. So it was therapy
Mhm.
and orthotics, which I
Mhm.
kind of knew a bit about that because we do a lot of, prefab orthotics, and the process is similar. But then
Mhm.
I was over things like nutrition
Mhm.
and radiology,
Mhm.
which I knew nothing about. But I will say, when I got moved, I wasn't really all that thrilled about it, and I don't think my team was either. But for me, it was a great learning experience because I got to see aspects of like how the whole company worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was really kind of an interesting experience. So after 2 years of that, then I swing back and I'm in this position that I'm at now. And the
Mhm.
position I'm at now is all metrics all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just hand therapy, it's other areas too?
Right. Well, so it's the hand therapy. I'm still acting as the director and
Uh-huh.
the clinical aspects, but they're metrics and all of this. And then for the outside contractors, I hold them accountable to their
Mhm.
metrics.
Mhm.
So staffing levels and actually like intervening if, say, an outside therapist is not meeting their metrics, then I have to go to their boss to deliver that message to get them held accountable.
Okay.
So there's lots and lots of webs of relationships.
Right. And you've had, a lot of time to cultivate skills that
Mhm.
allow you to be, effective, as you've had to transition into these roles. So if you were
Right.
to kind of describe or list the skill set that really is needed to be
Mhm.
successful and feel good about, transitioning into a management or admin role from a
Mhm.
clinical role, what would you say the skill set?
Yeah. Mhm. Well, so some of the things that make you a good hand therapist help, and some things just don't apply. But the things I think that help are your attention to detail,
Mhm.
setting a plan and measuring how you have advanced towards those goals. And then if you haven't advanced towards those goals, resetting those goals. So all of those things apply, and relationships, rapport.
Mhm.
But I would say there's obviously in management things that you need to learn that aren't part of the hand therapy portion, which are, basic financial things like reading a profit and loss statement.
Mhm.
Those aren't things you're going to know as a therapist.
Right.
Um, but I would say usually at the level that you're doing in in a rehab department, in a therapy department, it's pretty it's learned pretty easily. Like there's nothing about it. You're not going to the level of like a CPA. You can learn these things.
Mhm.
Um, I think you have to want to know more about the big picture. Um, and you have to be ready to not be liked all the time.
Right.
Um, that is one of the bigger challenges. It's like,
Yeah.
your peers, there are days where I look and think, oh, it was so fun when I used to work in a big department, way back. And we were all about the same age. We were all going through the same things, and it was really fun. It was like working on Friends or something, you know.
Yeah.
And the further you get up in management, the less of that there is. You know, you're supervising people and you're managing them, and it's not that you can't have rapport with them, but you can't be best friends with them. You know, it's because you're their boss, and you have to deliver uncomfortable information sometimes and ask them to do things that, you know, you're trying to get for the bigger team.
Right.
So you have to develop relationships, professional relationships with peers in the company. That's what's, you know, that's a bit challenging, because it can't be your coworker anymore. It has to be at a different level. And sometimes that can really be lonely,
Yeah.
because especially the further up you go, fewer those people are and the busier they are. So none of you really have time to just, you know, shoot the bull, so to speak.
Right,
Everybody,
right.
and especially now in the age of everybody is, you know, everybody's zooming in. So, you know, these people are not even in real time. So you have to be willing to not be liked, make decisions that are best for the whole. You have to be willing to, you know, speak to a lot of people that are experts in their field. Like I've had situations where, say, oh, here's a good one. So say the therapist calls out, and you have, as a surgeon, hand surgeon, on a clinic day, and you try to find coverage and you try to shift it around, but you know, maybe they're not going to have coverage, and you're dealing with this surgeon who is not happy about it. And you're like, well, you know, you have 4 hours that you're coming in to see patients, and I can't cancel someone who has a full schedule at another clinic just to come in because you might send 2 walk-in patients.
Right.
You know, you have to be willing to say, you know, give higher up like bad news too,
Yes. Yep.
and feel confident in your decisions. You know, I've had situations where a surgeon came over and was like, made a stink because someone was getting charged for a mallet splint. He's like,
Yes.
and in front of the patient was like, this costs like 50 cents. And it's
Right.
like, and you have to like take him aside and say,
Yeah. I feel like I've lived through like every scenario you're describing. It's so funny.
yes, I would say, you know, and for me, people probably don't believe this, but I'm really an introvert at heart. And so you have to like you have to push yourself a lot of
Yes.
times to like go interact with this person and deliver this message, because it's what has to be done.
Right.
So it's really makes you grow as an individual. And especially I would say too, like it's really challenging sometimes when you know, you have to do disciplinary action. Oh, that's absolutely the worst. And thankfully it happens infrequently, but it's probably one of the most challenging, you know, parts of the job. I
Right.
like the parts of the job when it's like, you know, the team is doing very well. The team had submissions accepted at ASHT
Yeah.
or things like that, you
Congratulations.
know.
Yes.
And that part is fun, because then I get to be the advocate and send this news up the chain. You know, this is what we're doing as a team. I love that. I love the team portion of it. The bean counting, nobody loves. I mean, if I guess somebody does love that, probably my CPA sister, but it's
Right.
like the bean counting is like, for me, it's a necessary evil. Let's just everybody know, be aware of it and do what we need to do so they don't bother us about it. And we can do bigger clinical things.
In your role now, given that you're the director of the hand therapy department and you've been it in the past, so like, what would you say the opportunities would be for someone in your role to contribute to the hand team? Like, are there things that you do to kind of rally the troops, or you know what I mean? Like working on projects, or maybe encouraging the submissions to ASHT? What are the kinds of things that you have the opportunity to still kind of immerse yourself in with regards to the clinical hand therapy elements?
Sure. Well, one of the best things that came out of that, again, my 2 year, my gap years, as I call them, was that we established a hand therapy council. So we have a council, it's like a committee with members from each of the different geographic regions. So those are really my key point members of the team, because they're the people who want to go above and beyond and want to help funnel information, to me and then relay it to their peers. So we did that. And so those within that, then I'm able to get, buy-in to a lot of different projects. So as you know, we did the fellowship that was in that 2 year so because I wasn't treating patients all the time, I had, and the other important part I would say in leadership is, I don't know how you were raised, but I was raised like, go to work, do a good job, and good work will be noticed. Well, that's not really how it works in the corporate world. How it works in the corporate world is if the people above you don't know what you're doing, it's really not happening. So in that 2 year period, I was working with operations and, I was talking to the chief operating officer and those kind of, that level of employee. And so I was able to bring my idea that I'd wanted to do for a long time, like you and I met years ago, but because finally now I'm at the right audience for this, something I had been trying to push for years, it was suddenly like, well, send us a proposal. And then a few weeks later, it's like, okay, we're going to do it. And I'm like, you're going to do it? And they're like, yeah, sounds great. Let's do it. So, it's just fascinating. It's like you have to make sure that not only are you can't just have a good idea and bury your head and just do your work. Like you have to promote. And the fun part for me is now I don't really have to promote myself. I get to promote my team. And so I think that thought I've lost my train of thought because I got off on that topic for a little bit. We were talking about, what do I get to do clinically now? So that is great. We have the fellowship and that we're on class number 2 and that's really exciting. And what I think is fun about that is not only pulling in the current mentees, but also new people for the mentorship. So it gives people who are already working in the clinic a way to give back and participate. And again, with this virtual world that we all live in, we're not in a big conference room. There used to be days when in the beginning, we would be all in one conference room. I would be having to worry about what I was going to feed these people for breakfast. And now we never are all in the same room. So this is a way to keep people connected. And then we had a team member who started a journal club. So now once a quarter, we're doing the journal club. She was one of our fellows. So that's exciting. And then I think, we've always tried to encourage people to do presentations at the national level. And now that we've kind of gotten it rolling, more people are applying and getting into that. And that's really, really fun. Like last year when we went to San Antonio, we had 6 team members. And again, because of the status that I am at the company now, like we can do things like go have a great team building dinner, paid for by the company. And it was fun. And we had a great time. So there's those kinds of things. And then I also like to bring in outside vendors at least once a year. We haven't really gotten that arranged so much. I'm just really getting my feet back under me in this new role. But we've had different vendors come in and we will do, like we had Debbie from Orphet came and did, and we coordinated it at 5 locations. We had people go to 5 different locations, but she did it virtually for the whole company at the same time. So even though we weren't all in one room, like the olden days, we were all virtually together and people came to a region. So still try to get people together in regions so that it's still that interaction, because especially for the people who were here from the beginning, it's like they remember how it was and they miss it and they like it. So, so those are the kinds of things that we do.
Yeah, so I mean, for you, you've evolved from clinician to an administrative role, but you've also evolved in a like very much a changing world, from these live interactions to now go, more
Yeah.
virtual. So that's kind of interesting that you've kind of navigated all of that. For therapists that might be interested in maybe going down the road of management, they have that interest. What would your recommendations be for them, just to kind of position themselves, to be ready to maybe
Yeah.
be competitive for roles like that?
Yeah. So one of the things I would say is to volunteer in a small way within the department. So, now that I'm in this position, always when you get into management, you're looking for like who can replace you. I don't, you should be looking for your next role and who can replace you in the role behind you.
Right.
So what I would say is, the people that come to me, I could almost pick them out, like who could do it next. It's like the people who come to me not only with like, hey, I need coverage. I'm going to be off for a week. You're like, okay, that's great. But the people who come to me and say, hey, I'm going to be off this week, the week of, I don't know, April the 5th through the 10th. And I have already contacted so and so, or, I'm working with therapist B and she's already, she can take some of my days and then we could do this. And I don't think we're going to need coverage on that day. Someone who is already thinking like for their own self, like
Right.
managing themselves well,
Right. Right.
that's the kind of thing. If they're already starting to like think about, well, how would I do this, or take an active role in the coverage portion, or like with students, like get involved and have to manage someone other than themselves, an extended role, then they may want to consider a role like this because they're obviously interested in the bigger picture. So I will say again, like I didn't do like a traditional thing. I didn't do like the PT MBA. I don't have an MBA. I've thought about it many, many times, and I've just always been able to propel forwards without it. I still consider doing it.
Yeah.
But that is one way that people do things is they get their MBA or they take some leadership classes. I read, I tend to like read as I need to, you know what I'm saying? Like read as I go. Like if there's an issue, there's so many resources now, like and free resources that you can read, like down to like minutia. So there's lots of ways to get it without having to like go pay tens of thousands of dollars for an MBA.
Right.
I will say, like, I've almost always worked in private practice, which doesn't have the great, resources of like if you work at a hospital system, often they have their own leadership programs, or like
Right.
Select Medical does that for their employees, has the programs. And I believe Rothman is starting a program like that now, internally as well, to recognize, young leaders. So, but that's the way to do it. But I would say honestly, just start taking an initiative.
Absolutely. Because
Yes.
I think just doing that alone puts you on the radar for positions
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they notice the people that are, you know, staying longer, going beyond their job description, wanting to
Mhm.
grow their skills. I think that definitely lays the groundwork to position someone. And then you had mentioned that you're also involved in a leadership development program through ASHG, right?
I am. So this year, I'm on the leadership development committee, and I came in. They had started this last year, so I kind of came in midstream. But they we developed a curriculum for people who want to get into leadership. And one of the reasons they did it was because there's going to be kind of a gap in the upper leadership roles in ASHT, because people, are getting of a certain age and it's turning over. So, they want to backfill those positions and trying to, and really, if anyone is interested, it's a great way to get involved. First of all, I would say get involved in ASHT in a small way, and then build your way up. But Yeah, we developed a curriculum about leadership, and it is 6 months, a 6-month curriculum. It started, I believe that's right, March through September, and people applied, and there was a application process and a wading through process. But it's going to be a great foundational, like, basics of leadership. It's not going to get into the nitty-gritty of like reading and profit and loss statements, that kind of thing, but it's a good resource.
Yeah, so the people that that would appeal to are who? Clinicians that what?
Yeah, so there's some clinicians that are in it that have practiced for a good bit of time and are already leaders who want to know more leadership skills. And then there are some who are just newer clinicians who want to do this through their pathway. Yeah, so it's kind of all walks of life.
Yeah, I think that's really neat. And are there maybe like practice owners?
I believe one of them is a private practice owner.
I mean, I think that's
one has worked for a long time. I mean, solid, like, over 20 years of experience, like way. Yeah. Do people come to it for different reasons, but and they have some really unique ideas of like what they want to do. I would say the people I'm mentoring right now, I had 2 and one had to stop for personal reasons, but they were both interested in underserved populations and like leadership in underserved populations. So
I think that's fair. I think it's just in terms of professional satisfaction, I think it's professional growth that keeps people satisfied and loving what they do. And I just think management or if someone's interested in leadership through like for other reasons, like you said, serving underserved populations, definitely finding that roadway and finding your way there. And it's good that there are these pathways to support people. So
sure.
Yeah, but I think that there's therapists that are definitely interested in or curious about what management looks like. So I thank you so much for giving us a little bit of a sense of what that transition was like and what your experiences are. And thank you.
You're welcome. And if anyone wants to, contact and talk further, I'd be happy. You can share my email.
Okay, good. So if you're interested in Cynthia's contact information, if you want to email me at marilla@virtualhandfellowship.com, I can get you in touch with Cynthia. And again, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you later.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.